My brother's new wife actually called the cops on me for being in my own house. Yeah, you heard that right. The house she and my brother were living in rent-free. She had no clue I owned it. Let me tell you exactly what happened. You won't believe how far this went. I'm Riley Monroe, 29, and my brother Caleb, 31, recently married Brielle, 27. On the surface, she seemed sweet and charming, but there was something cold about her that I couldn't ignore. That afternoon, I went over to my house to grab some old documents I'd left there. Caleb and Brielle had been living there for months, supposedly temporarily, but really rent-free, while I kept paying everything. The moment I stepped in, Brielle's face went pale, then twisted into anger. "What are you doing here?" she yelled, like I had broken into someone else's home. Caleb just stood there, looking uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. My stomach sank a little, because I already knew how she could twist a situation to make me look bad. Before I could even explain, Brielle had her phone out. She was dialing 911, talking fast, telling them a trespasser had broken in. I tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. By the time the police arrived, she was pacing and glaring at me like I'd done something unforgivable. Caleb just hung back, silent. When the officers asked what was going on, I stayed calm. I handed over my ID and the ownership papers for the house. The officers read through them carefully, then looked back at Brielle. Her expression went from smug to shocked, then downright guilty. Caleb's jaw tightened, and I could see he was struggling with what to say. The reality hit her hard. This was my house, legally mine all along. There was a long silence. The police apologized to me quietly and left Brielle standing there, stunned. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with disbelief and a hint of anger, like I had ruined some story she'd been telling herself about how I had no right to the home. Caleb finally muttered an awkward, "I didn't know she'd react like that," but it was too late. As I walked through the living room, holding my documents, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a house, or even about money or rent. This was about control, about respect, and about everything they thought I didn't deserve. I had spent years building a life, supporting my family, and yet they treated me like I was an intruder in my own home. That day, I understood clearly. Standing up for myself wasn't optional anymore. I wasn't just reclaiming a house. I was reclaiming my voice, my boundaries, and my place in my own life. That's when I realized this wasn't about a house. It was about everything they thought I didn't deserve. I bought that house with my own 2 hands, working late nights and weekends, while Caleb drifted through life without a care. Our parents died when I was just 22, leaving me to take care of my older brother while finishing school. It wasn't fair, but I didn't think about fairness back then. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. I remember juggling my hospital admin job with endless overtime, stretching every paycheck to cover the mortgage, utilities, and everything our parents had left behind. Caleb never really noticed how hard I worked. He spent money recklessly, asking for help when bills piled up or when he wanted something new. I always said yes. I figured family comes first, and I loved him enough to sacrifice my own comfort. When Caleb met Brielle, things started to change. At first, I thought she was a blessing. She seemed smart, polished, and capable of guiding him. But over time, I noticed Caleb listening to her more than he listened to me. Small things like how he spent his money, how he decorated his apartment, even how he talked about me behind my back. Brielle had a way of making him doubt me without him even realizing it. One day, she told me gently, but with that knowing smile, "Riley, why don't you take a break? Let Caleb and I have the house for a while. You've done so much already." I hesitated, heart heavy, because I knew she didn't see it as a temporary thing. But I was tired of arguing, tired of being the responsible one while everyone else just lived their lives. I agreed, thinking maybe she was right. Maybe a little space would be good for all of us. Those months turned into years. I visited sometimes to pick up things, but it didn't feel like my house anymore. It felt like a place where my hard work and love had been overshadowed by Brielle's charm and Caleb's complacency. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I'd take it back when the time was right. But every time I thought about stepping in, guilt held me back. I didn't want to be the sister who ruined their happiness. Looking back now, I see clearly how much I gave. I gave sleepless nights, extra shifts, money I could have saved, emotional labor that no one acknowledged. And in return, I got distance. Distance from the home I built, distance from my brother who once relied on me, and distance from the life I worked so hard to create. I gave them a home. They gave me distance. And that distance taught me something crucial. Love and sacrifice are powerful, but they shouldn't cost you your dignity or your place in your own life. That's when I realized I needed to take back what was mine, not out of anger, but out of the respect I owed myself for all those years of giving. Months later, I went back to the house to grab some old belongings I had stored away. The moment I walked in, I froze. The place looked completely unrecognizable. Family photos were gone, furniture replaced with sleek, modern pieces that weren't ours, and the walls were painted in colors I would never have chosen. It wasn't just a makeover, it was a takeover. Brielle was there, of course, smiling like she owned every inch of it. And apparently she did, at least in her mind. I overheard her talking to a neighbor outside, her voice bright and full of pride. "I'm finally living in my dream house," she said, laughing, as if the years I had spent working for this home never existed. I felt a pit form in my stomach. This was my space, my memories, my home, and she was flaunting it like it was all hers. Caleb was there too, but he avoided my eyes completely. He barely spoke, shuffling around awkwardly whenever I came into a room. I could tell he was uncomfortable, but he didn't correct Brielle or stand up for me. It stung more than I expected. The brother I had cared for, sacrificed for, had let this happen right under his nose. I tried to keep my composure while collecting my things, but every glance at Brielle made my blood boil. There were small things too, subtle digs disguised as jokes, fake smiles that felt like knives, little ways she reminded me I didn't belong. She would brush past me, comment on how different the house looks now that it has someone who really cares for it, and then laugh at her own joke. Caleb just nodded along silently, never defending me, never stopping her. It wasn't just about the furniture or the paint. It was about presence, about claiming a place in someone else's life, about slowly erasing me from it. Brielle had mastered the art of manipulation, making it seem like she and Caleb were perfectly happy together, like I was the outsider causing tension. And the worst part, Caleb seemed to accept it, letting her rewrite the rules of our family without even a word. By the time I finished packing my boxes, I realized something painful. Brielle hadn't just moved into my house. She had moved into my place in Caleb's life too. She had taken the years of care, sacrifice, and love I had poured into our relationship and replaced them with her own version of control. It was subtle, quiet, and almost invisible to anyone outside, but I could feel it in every glance, every word, every empty corner where my presence used to matter. Walking out that day, I promised myself I wouldn't let this continue. I had given too much to let someone erase it with fake smiles and borrowed charm. She didn't just move into my house. She moved into my place in his life, and I wasn't going to let her stay there unchallenged. One afternoon, while sorting through my mail, I noticed a stack of unpaid utility bills addressed to me. My heart sank as I realized these were for the house Caleb and Brielle had been living in. I had been covering everything, mortgage, taxes, and now utilities too, while they treated the place like it was theirs. I felt my patience cracking. I called Caleb that evening, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why are these bills still in my name? You've been living there for months." His answer made my blood boil. "Brielle handles all the finances now," he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the way he expected me to just accept it. The next evening, I decided to confront them both during dinner. I sat across from Brielle, who smiled sweetly at first, but when I spoke, her expression shifted. She acted offended, as if I had crossed some invisible line. "You're being so controlling, Riley," she said, her tone sharp. "Why can't you just let us manage things our way?" I wanted to scream. Controlling? I was the one paying for everything while they played house. Brielle's smirk didn't stop there. As dinner continued, she joked, loud enough for the neighbors outside to hear, that I should finally move on from the past. I could feel every eye at the table piercing me, but Caleb stayed silent, staring at his plate. The joke wasn't funny. It was a public display of dominance, a way to remind me I was nothing in this home. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I laid out the facts, the mortgage, the taxes, the bills, all of which I had been covering alone. I reminded Caleb that he and Brielle had been living there rent-free, and it was time to start contributing. "Either you start paying your share, or you need to move out," I said firmly, meeting his eyes for the first time that evening. The room went tense. Brielle's face fell for a split second, then hardened. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She wasn't worried about the money. She was worried about losing control, worried that I had finally realized the truth about their manipulation. Caleb didn't speak. He just nodded slightly, the weight of the reality sinking in. That night, something shifted. Brielle stopped pretending she was sweet and accommodating. I could feel the hostility radiating from her, a quiet promise that she would do whatever it took to remove me from the picture. My warning to Caleb wasn't just about money. It was about boundaries, respect, and reclaiming what I had built. As I left the dinner table that night, I knew one thing clearly. Brielle had made a decision. She had decided that if she couldn't control me quietly, she would try to get rid of me entirely. And in that moment, I understood just how far she was willing to go to protect her version of our house. That was the night Brielle decided to get rid of me for good. One afternoon, while sorting through my mail, I noticed a stack of unpaid utility bills addressed to me. My heart sank as I realized these were for the house Caleb and Brielle had been living in. I had been covering everything, mortgage, taxes, and now utilities too, while they treated the place like it was theirs. I felt my patience cracking. I called Caleb that evening, trying to keep my voice calm. "Why are these bills still in my name? You've been living there for months." His answer made my blood boil. "Brielle handles all the finances now," he said quietly, avoiding my gaze. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the way he expected me to just accept it. The next evening, I decided to confront them both during dinner. I sat across from Brielle, who smiled sweetly at first, but when I spoke, her expression shifted. She acted offended, as if I had crossed some invisible line. "You're being so controlling, Riley," she said, her tone sharp. "Why can't you just let us manage things our way?" I wanted to scream. Controlling? I was the one paying for everything while they played house. Brielle's smirk didn't stop there. As dinner continued, she joked, loud enough for the neighbors outside to hear, that I should finally move on from the past. I could feel every eye at the table piercing me, but Caleb stayed silent, staring at his plate. The joke wasn't funny. It was a public display of dominance, a way to remind me I was nothing in this home. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I laid out the facts, the mortgage, the taxes, the bills, all of which I had been covering alone. I reminded Caleb that he and Brielle had been living there rent-free, and it was time to start contributing. "Either you start paying your share, or you need to move out," I said firmly, meeting his eyes for the first time that evening. The room went tense. Brielle's face fell for a split second, then hardened. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She wasn't worried about the money. She was worried about losing control, worried that I had finally realized the truth about their manipulation. Caleb didn't speak. He just nodded slightly, the weight of the reality sinking in. That night, something shifted. Brielle stopped pretending she was sweet and accommodating. I could feel the hostility radiating from her, a quiet promise that she would do whatever it took to remove me from the picture. My warning to Caleb wasn't just about money. It was about boundaries, respect, and reclaiming what I had built. As I left the dinner table that night, I knew one thing clearly. Brielle had made a decision. She had decided that if she couldn't control me quietly, she would try to get rid of me entirely. And in that moment, I understood just how far she was willing to go to protect her version of our house. That was the night Brielle decided to get rid of me for good. I had grown used to Brielle's subtle digs and fake smiles, but nothing could have prepared me for the lengths she would go to now. She had started spreading rumors among our neighbors, painting me as jealous, unstable, someone who couldn't handle change. I heard whispers as I walked by, people glancing at me with pity or suspicion. It hurt, but I tried to ignore it. One weekend, I went over to the house to pick up a few boxes I'd left behind. Simple things, nothing valuable, just memories and documents. The moment I stepped onto the porch, I sensed something was off. Brielle appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of fear and shock, like I had materialized out of nowhere. "There's a trespasser in my house," she shouted into her phone, dialing 911 before I could even speak. I froze for a moment, stunned by the audacity. While she babbled to the dispatcher, Caleb emerged from the kitchen, pale as a ghost. He opened his mouth like he might speak, but no words came out. It was clear he didn't know what to do, and he wasn't going to defend me. My stomach tightened, but I refused to show panic. When the police arrived, they were cautious, guns holstered but ready, and they looked between me and Brielle with uncertainty. I raised my hand slowly, keeping my voice calm. "I'm Riley Monroe," I said. "This is my house." I handed over my ID and then the ownership documents. The officers took a moment to read through them carefully, scanning each page as Brielle's confident facade faltered. Her eyes widened as the truth sank in. She went from fear to shock to something else entirely, anger masked with disbelief. The officers exchanged glances, then looked back at her. "Ma'am," one said politely, "these documents show that she is the legal owner of this house." Brielle froze, her phone slipping from her hand. Caleb's shoulders slumped, guilt written all over his face, but he still didn't speak. The moment was electric. Neighbors who had gathered to watch now murmured in surprise, staring at Brielle in ways they hadn't before. The rumors she had spun so carefully unraveled in seconds. She had tried to make me the villain, the unstable sister who couldn't move on, but the truth hit everyone at once. I had been paying for this home all along. The officers apologized to me quietly, their tone professional, acknowledging the mistake without fuss. Brielle, however, didn't apologize. She just stared, wide-eyed and rigid, as if I had ruined some performance she had been rehearsing for months. I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction, knowing the truth was finally undeniable. That day, I realized something important. Lies and manipulation can only go so far. No matter how much Brielle tried to twist reality, the facts were on my side. I had the proof, and now everyone else could see it too. The house was mine, and so was my dignity. The confrontation had been public, humiliating for her, but it was exactly the clarity I needed to take the next step, reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The officers apologized. She didn't. She just stared at me like I'd ruined her performance. After the police left that day, everything changed. Caleb stopped answering my calls and texts. He avoided me entirely, pretending like our years together didn't exist. I would see him sometimes across the street or at family events, but he looked through me, not at me. It hurt more than I expected. The brother I had cared for, sacrificed for, and defended all my life was suddenly distant, leaving me to face the aftermath alone. Brielle, of course, didn't slow down. Even without me seeing it directly, I could tell she was working her usual tricks, whispers to neighbors, half-truths, and stories that made it seem like I had overreacted. She wanted everyone to believe she was the victim, that I was the unstable sister who couldn't let go. It was infuriating, but I didn't engage. I had learned my lesson about losing my temper with her. It never ended well. Instead, I started taking quiet steps. I contacted my lawyer to begin eviction proceedings. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or post anything online. This wasn't about revenge through chaos. It was about reclaiming what was mine, legally and decisively. My lawyer explained that it would take weeks. "It's a process," she said calmly. "But it will happen. Just follow through." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Weeks of legal steps ahead, but at least the path was clear. Even as I prepared for the eviction, I felt torn. I still loved Caleb. He was my brother, after all. I remembered the nights I stayed up helping him, the time I covered his rent when he was broke, the encouragement I had given him to chase his dreams. Part of me wanted to reach out, to beg him to stand up for me, to remind him that I wasn't his enemy. But deep down, I knew this was bigger than family ties. I wasn't willing to let love blind me anymore. I wouldn't be treated like a fool in my own home. The silence from Caleb and the hostility from Brielle gave me clarity. For too long, I had let their opinions and manipulations dictate my life. For too long, I had sacrificed my comfort, my voice, and my peace for a brother who couldn't even defend me. Now the silence felt like a signal. It was a space where I could think clearly, plan my next moves, and regain control over what I had built. Sitting in my office that evening, reviewing papers and writing notes for my lawyer, I realized something important. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't about humiliation or proving them wrong in front of the world. This was about focus. Focus on the house. Focus on the boundaries I needed to set. Focus on the life I had been putting on hold for years. I took a deep breath and felt a quiet determination settle in. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. The sheriff's deputy handed the eviction notice to Brielle while I stood on the sidewalk, heart pounding but calm. She screamed like I hadn't already heard every accusation. "How could you do this to us, Riley? You're so greedy and heartless," she shouted. Neighbors gathered, watching, and Caleb stood behind her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen. Brielle's voice cracked, but I didn't answer. I had signed the papers, paid the fees, and followed the legal steps. The deputy explained the timeline and my legal rights, then left, leaving us in silence. Caleb finally found his voice, eyes wet. "Please, Riles," he said, using the old nickname. "Let us stay until we figure things out. 30 days. I'll help with the bills. I promise." For a moment, I felt the old pull of family late-night talks, the time I covered him when he lost his job. But I remembered unpaid taxes, bills in my name, nights I worked extra shifts because he had overspent. Sympathy softened me, but not enough to let everything slide again. I took a breath and nodded. 30 days, I said. Not a day more. We shook hands, painfully polite. Brielle muttered something about me, enjoying other people's misfortune. But Caleb's relief was clear. He hugged me awkwardly, whispered a shaky thank you, and went inside. I watched them through the window as the door closed, feeling sorrow and resolve. The next weeks were surreal. Brielle acted like nothing had happened. She threw small parties, a few friends, cheap decorations, music low enough to be annoying but not to draw attention. She posted smiling photos about new beginnings, though I avoided her feed. It hurt to see her pretend while empty boxes and eviction reminders stacked in the corner. I documented everything quietly. Photos of the parties, dates stamped, noise complaints logged when needed. I kept copies of bills, messages, every neglectful moment proving they hadn't treated the place like a home. It wasn't vindictive. It was practical. If they wanted to play games, I'd finish them by the rules. Neighbors' whispering turned into concerned questions, and some apologized for doubting me. Caleb left once during the 30 days for a few nights, coming back with thin excuses. Brielle grew colder, more theatrical in her fury when she thought no one watched. I didn't respond. I managed calls with my lawyer, made lists, and planned repairs for when the house was finally mine. The last night before their deadline, I stood at the window and watched the house lights go out one by one. I felt a strange lightness, not joy, something quieter. A hard-earned calm settled over me. I pictured the repairs I would do, repaint, replace the photos, fix porch swing, things that would stitch the house back together. I wanted it to feel like the home I had built, not a stage for someone else's act. If they wanted to play games, I'd finish them by the rules. A week after the eviction, I started hearing whispers about Brielle's past. At first, I didn't want to believe it. It sounded too convenient, too much like gossip. But as I dug deeper, the pieces fit together in a way I couldn't ignore. Brielle had a history of evictions, leaving apartments and rental agreements in ruin. Credit issues, unpaid bills, and legal troubles followed her like a shadow. More troubling, I learned she had manipulated previous partners, charming them into trusting her completely while she slowly took over their lives and finances. The truth settled in my chest like a stone. No wonder Caleb had been so blind. She had perfected the art of control. That evening, my phone rang. It was Caleb. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Riles." He stopped, as if struggling to find words. I could hear the shame and exhaustion beneath his tone. "Brielle, she left after the eviction," he finally said, his voice breaking. "I didn't see it coming, and I should have listened to you. I'm so sorry." I felt a mix of emotions, relief, anger, and a lingering sadness. My brother, the one I had protected and supported, had been manipulated, and now he was facing the consequences. He continued, voice trembling. Can I move back in? I don't know where else to go." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to run into his arms, forgive him immediately, and let things return to the way they were. But I remembered every unpaid bill, every silent betrayal, every moment I had been ignored while Brielle made herself at home in my life and my house. My heart ached for him, but I knew some boundaries couldn't be crossed again. "I'm sorry, Caleb," I said gently but firmly. "You can't move back in. Not right now. Not like this. You need to figure out your own life, and I can't risk letting the past repeat itself." I could hear the disappointment in his sigh, the way he had hoped for an easy return. But I had learned my lesson. Guilt could not control me anymore. "Oh, I understand," he said quietly. Then, hesitating, he added, "Can we at least meet for coffee? Just to talk. I don't want to lose my sister completely." I smiled softly, despite the tension in my chest. "Yes, we can do that," I said. "I'll meet you. But this is just coffee, nothing more, nothing less." As I hung up, I felt a sense of closure. I had faced Brielle's manipulation, reclaimed my house, and now I could begin separating my love for my brother from the chaos he had allowed into our lives. I had learned to protect my peace without abandoning my family entirely. I sat in the quiet of my living room, thinking about everything I had endured, everything I had rebuilt. I'd lost a house once to guilt. I wasn't losing my peace again. Once Brielle and Caleb were gone for good, I stood in the middle of the living room and finally breathed. The wreckage of the eviction still lingered, broken furniture, scratched floors, and stained carpets, But instead of despair, I felt a spark of determination. This house had been mine all along, and now it was time to take it back, truly. I started with small steps. I repainted the walls in the soft, warm colors my parents had loved. I restored the photos they had taken, carefully placing them back on the shelves and walls. The worn furniture I had stored away was brought out and polished until it gleamed. I fixed the broken lamp, replaced missing appliances, and scrubbed every corner until it smelled like home again. Each task reminded me of the years I had spent keeping this house alive while others treated it like a playground. As I worked, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: freedom. Freedom from manipulation, from guilt, from living in someone else's version of my life. Every brushstroke, every polish, every repaired corner was an affirmation that I was reclaiming not just a house, but my sense of self. I could feel my parents' presence in the small details, the way the curtains hung, the soft glow of the lamps, the familiar creak of the floorboards. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was a reminder that this home had been built with love, care, and sacrifice. And I had preserved that. Caleb called occasionally, his voice hesitant. He was rebuilding his own life slowly, learning the hard lessons of responsibility and trust. I offered guidance when he asked, but I kept my distance, knowing that forgiveness didn't mean reopening doors that had been closed for good. He needed to find stability for himself, and I needed to protect the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. I walked through the house one evening, now fully restored, and paused in each room, taking in the result of months of hard work. The living room glowed warmly in the late afternoon sun, the kitchen sparkled, and the bedrooms felt inviting, comforting, and familiar. It was no longer a battleground, it was a sanctuary. I realized then that taking back my house wasn't just about ownership on paper. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my sense of control over my life. Sitting in my parents' old armchair, I reflected on everything I had endured: the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. I had faced them all and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. Forgiveness didn't require me to let people back into my life, and love didn't require sacrificing my peace. I had learned that the hard way, but now it was clear. I took one last deep breath, the air in the house fresh and calm, and smiled. The locks were changed, the air was clear, and for once the house felt like mine again. Do you think Riley handled everything the right way by standing her ground? Or should she have let her brother and Brielle stay despite everything? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new one.